Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Let's see if I can get. Yeah, I'm in chat. Hi, everyone. I'm Bram. I think everybody here knows me, but in case you're watching online, I'm Bram. I work for Placeholder Gameworks. I'm a tech artist for them, and I work on a game called Craft. Ooh, there's my mouse. And today I'm going to talk about tech art stuff, which hopefully will make some sense to some people. Yeah, I think that's it. So I'm gonna have a few things, some pointers for today. I have a little blue thingy with a hey person. If you see that in the bottom left, it means that at the end of the slide, I'll do a quick little question round in case, there's some questions. Same goes for the online people. Try to not do it too long in order to get like swamped up, but in that way, I don't have to have the questions at the end of the presentation and then the online people can't ask questions because we'll be an offline part as well, which is, we'll get to that when we get there, but for the online people, you'll get most of it, don't worry. And secondly, there's no truth in everything that I'm saying. Like, I'm not an authority on any of this, and there are no perfect solutions, otherwise known as nothing is true, there are no perfect solutions, and everything is permitted. I'm not an authority. It's like Assassin's Creed, just remember that part. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm not here to talk about what is correct, I'm just talking about what I do, if that makes sense. So I rather think about problem solving rather than being 100% correct on like the technical terms or something, because I never studied for this, so I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so today what we're going to talk about is tech art problem solving. So if you're a tech artist, which means something, we're going to get into that. What does a tech artist actually do? And how do we do that correctly? I have a few pillars I live by, or work by. I don't live by them. That would be a little bit weird. So we're going to go through those. I'll have a few examples that we can go through, and I'll actually go into how I use them in some projects. And hopefully that'll be very fun, because it'll be the first time I get to show some of these projects. These projects are a short delivery, which is my own little small indie game that I made beginning of this year. Craft, which is the game I'm making for Lene, which I'm really excited about. And they're both kind of different size. One is definitely for like the solo indie, which is kind of maybe some of you out here that more in that kind of space with your project. And on the other end, there's like mid-sized teams. So kind of if you graduate, get your funding, what does that look like for a tech artist? So there's also a super secret NDA project that is going to be only treated offline. My apologies. So sorry for the online people, but you're going to have to get over here to Spelkollektivet and actually attend these things physically, which is very fun. Come to our house. It's really cool. You can probably, since it's on stream, you can probably find it somewhere around here. So check that out. If I have enough time and if everybody feels like it, I can also hook up my computer during our offline session and actually go into some more grimy code stuff. But also feel free to just approach me after the presentation or in the next few weeks if you have questions, because I'm always excited to talk about these things. So, who am I even? And why should you listen to me? It's always a very good one. Well, I kind of introduced myself already, but I am from the Netherlands, from Groningen. That's where I was born. I'm 25, and it says there I've been programming for 11 years, so that makes people probably think I'm that mythical creature that has 10 years of experience while only being 25 years old. I kind of started programming when I was very young. And when I got out of high school, I immediately got a job at a full stack web development job. So because of that, I already started getting my hands dirty with a lot of programming stuff. And then I, at that point, decided, no, I'm going to do game development stuff. And since then, I've been kind of slowly accumulating about 6 years of experience in the field, and I think I've been doing tech art for most of that time, even without me knowing it, which is, kind of like the nature of tech art. Sometimes you don't, it's such a weird overlapping gray field. So I think it would be great if we can define it maybe a little bit. So let's do that. What does a tech artist even do? I looked it up, and wasn't really that clear of a definition. It says here, I think on the slide, they set up and maintain a workflow of art production and decide what tools a studio should use, investigating new techniques, and implementing these in pipelines. Which I already had a few discussions with some people in the house about how this term differs radically based on the studio and stuff. For the sake of today, in basic terms, I'm just going to use the definition. People that do kind of like production design, that kind of make sure that the content enters the game in some way, shape, or form. This obviously differs, like I said, your mileage may vary, and I'm not here to claim that this is what tech art means or what it should be, but I'm just going to use this definition for the sake of talking about it for now. If you like this definition, feel free to use it for yourself as well, but I'm pretty sure I'm probably wrong somewhere, so my apologies. So.
Something glitches.
The slides are doing a weird thing.
Oh, no. Back and forth?
Yeah.
Are we good? All right, good. Are we good?
Yeah.
All right, we are good. All right, so on to the meat and the gritty stuff of the presentation. My tech art pillars, which, they're not pillars that hold up a house, they're pillars that hold up my livelihood, because if I'm not good at this, I lose my job. So, how do we do good production design, basically? How do we do good tech art? Well, I think, and this is kind of what I boiled it down to, is that your solutions, your tech should infer from creative intent, prioritize artist UX, build intuitive language, be portable, and it shouldn't reinvent the wheel. Now, what does that mean? I'm going to quickly go through every one of them. Are we still good on the glitching? Yeah. All right, cool. Emojis. Hopefully the emojis they're prettier on my laptop, I promise. Infer from creative intent. This means that if you design your tools or solutions in tech art, let's say, we'll get to some of them in a bit. If there's a problem, we need to import a lot of files into our game engine, but it takes a lot of time. How do we make sure that happens in a way that we don't cause the files to be different, so that the artist has to create or work differently? We want the creative intention of the artist to remain the same, so not alter their creative intent. It's a little bit vague. Our solution should always go to what the artist would want out of their thing. If we compromise the artist's ability to do their work, our game will suffer, and in a result we'll get a less good game. I've seen a lot of different solutions from different programmers or tech artists that would somehow make it harder for an artist to work. So this is one of the core principles I wanted to uphold, so that there's never a moment in which an artist has to change their ways or their creative way of thinking just because of a solution that I come up with or someone else comes up with. Second, prioritize artist UX. Now this is kind of infers from the other one as well, but you got to make sure that the tools that you create actually are usable by the artist. A good example of a bad solution is making tiny scripts that only run on your computer, or that are very code heavy or require a lot of steps to set up. You want it to be easy enough for an artist to kind of be part of their workflow. Think about maybe writing plugins for the software that they use, or making sure that it is part of, it's easy enough within their skill set, technical literacy, that they can kind of use it. Think about it like, the teapot that I have in there. If you were to pour hot tea from a vase, you would have a very hard time kind of portioning it. If you have the teapot, it has the perfect little ear, that it's not hot in your hands, you can portion it perfectly. Think about, the UX in that way. Make sure it is very usable by your artist. Build intuitive language. Are we glitching again? Oh. Yeah, there we are. All right, build intuitive language. Now, one thing that I also kind of ran into a lot while working on different projects is that existing pipelines that were there used a lot of conflicting terms that either didn't have their definition very clear or conflicted with other words in the project. So think about the word scene, for instance, is a word that we probably use a lot in different engines or different things. But if you want to talk about a scene in the sense of theater or movie, it can get very confusing to keep using the word scene if it technically means something different in your project. So what I've done in that case, I've referred to a setup with different actors. I call that a stage. So that way we have a different word to define something, and we can keep talking about it, and we don't have to get confused about these words that we keep using. It's kind of, I like to say that the most used tool in game development is actually the communication with your fellow developers. So as a tech artist, you have a very big effect on how things get named and how we communicate these terms to each other. So if you're not careful and you have things overlapping, or things aren't really clear, or the name doesn't accurately describe what you made, you can kind of get into these places where you get confusion, and confusion leads to frustration, and that leads to you not being very happy with your game dev project. So make sure that with the solutions that you build, that it goes towards language that you can intuitively use with your fellow game developers. Yeah, I think if you look at modern software, yeah, no, this is I forgot a point. If you look at stuff like, I think Unity and Godot and Unreal are very good at having these terms be very separate and having them mean things, but you probably find out when you start working on your own things or start working on these pipelines that you might not have this sense of like, oh, what do I name these things? So take inspiration from software where you can see these things being very distinct. All right, are we good now? Yeah, portable. Be portable. Now that also means in the literal portable sense of like porting, but also in the technical sense of like make sure it runs everywhere, your solutions, if you can. So if you make tools, it's probably very likely that you have people on your team that maybe use Mac, maybe use Linux, maybe use Windows, or maybe an older or a newer version of things. Make sure that people can use it no matter what. A tool is only as good if people can use it. If they can't use it because of this limitation, it's not really useful. So another same example, if you make a bash script, which the programmers probably maybe will know, only works on Linux, trying to run that on Windows, you can do it, but you don't want an artist to set that up. It's too many steps, too many potential for it to go wrong, and it's not intuitive. And it's also it's not portable at all. So if you can, try to make sure that you write your tools in languages that run everywhere and don't require a lot of steps to have it running. So that way, the nice thing about this side effect is that your tools will be very easy to port later on when you go to different platforms or consoles, because you've already taken into account that your code should be able to run everywhere. Last one. Don't reinvent the wheel. Or shouldn't. Yeah? Are we good?
One more thing. It's very funny.
Yeah, all right. The computer's fighting me,
Yeah.
and I'm losing. All right, yeah, don't reinvent the wheel. When you make solutions, keep in mind that there's loads of other people in our community that have made tools before, and you should probably use them because it's better than trying to redo it yourself. You make a lot of mistakes, and in launch week, you don't want it to all come crashing down. You should try to do that. Now, when I say, I did a lot of should, and like, you ought to, but what does that mean? Be a little bit pragmatic in the sense that you don't have to follow any of these pillars to the fullest. Sometimes certain things outrank each other. So, usually if you come up to me and say like, oh, I have this problem in my, art pipeline or whatever, how do I solve it? I would say depends, because that's the nature of our work, right? So, when I say, sometimes you might have a thing where a tool that you use has like it's very old, has poor documentation, and it doesn't help with intuitive language or having your artist work with it easily. You should probably build your own, even though you shouldn't reinvent the wheel. Sometimes it's better to do it anyway. Hope that kind of makes sense. Also, sometimes you might run into a situation in which you can make it portable, but then it wouldn't be as intuitive to use for your artists. So you should probably make it, that's a choice for you to make, obviously, but usually you should go for it. Well, if there's only a Windows version and your artist works on Windows, just make it for Windows. It doesn't have to be portable. So, like I said, take it with a grain of salt. And lastly, make sure that all these things actually fit within your scope of your project and within the limitations of the platforms you might be releasing on. You can make these very cool art asset pipelines, or the limitations usually is more just like time. You know, if a simple script can solve something and nobody else has to use it, just write a simple script. You don't have to build this whole thing in order for just a simple problem. Oh yeah, I had a little question thing. Does anybody have any questions up until now? Just quickly look at the chat. No. Okay, then I'll move on. All right, we're gonna get into some real life examples, but usually these real life examples are kind of met with I have a problem statement, and then I try to verbalize a solution through documentation. So I was just like, oh, we have this problem, and then I go, okay, solution for this, and then lay it out for the rest of my team so we can talk about it. I pitch it to them, and if I'm allowed to make it, I make it. So, yeah. Let's start with first thing. Hopefully this loads properly. It does. This is my little game. I made a game in January when I came back from a trip in Romania after I played a short hike. The name might allude to where my inspiration came from. It's basically a game about Little Red Riding Hood driving around in Romania. It's like a Romanian adaptation of Little Red Riding Hood. And I am technically the only artist and person on it. So, you know, this is our solo dev kind of tech art situation. I think I have, that's up there. There's a little bit of a trailer, maybe can help with a little bit of an idea of what the game is. So I'll try to watch from here and say some stuff maybe. So it's very PlayStation 1 style. I think some of the homies here might know that this is actually a fan game off of another homie's game. I was actually inspired by their game, and I was like, oh, I want to make something like that too. So I did. I didn't know him at the time, obviously, and it's really funny that we met here. Yeah, it's slightly different from the game that he was making, obviously, but you know, it's, as you can see, it has a car, it has a lot of different environments. You're literally driving through the streets. It's trying to replicate a Romanian town, so there's a lot of assets, and it's a very big scope for a project that you're trying to do by yourself. Obviously, there's also a dialogue system, and you know, all these different kinds of things. So, oh no. Pray to God, no. All right, we're back. All right, so on to the meat. On to the meat. So, one of the things I did to make sure that I can actually do it by myself, big problem that I had was like, how do I make a city that feels real, and how do I make a city to begin with, because I'm not a city planner or anything. And the tech artist in myself was like, all right, don't reinvent the wheel, because we can just use public data from OpenStreetMap, which is like kind of like Google Maps alternative that's open source. So I have a lot of data about where buildings are, and funnily enough, I can also keep it close to creative intent because I wanted to replicate the city that my partner grew up in. So I got to combine things there. And also, because of that, I use real world data. It also feels more real. I don't have to think about, would a building be here, or like, does this balance feel well? No, it's a real city. It is real. Sometimes, obviously, you have to tweak it a bit in order to make it feel the way you want to for your game. And also, I wanted it to be non-destructive in a sense, because I didn't want to have a workflow where if I delete something, then everything's fucked and I need to go back into my pipeline and try to fix it. I want to make sure that there's one source of truth all the way down to like when I actually have it in Godot. And the nice thing is, because this OpenStreetMap thing worked in Blender, it imports in Godot quite flawlessly, so it fit in quite nicely. So it hit all my little tech art pillars, which I was very happy about. Are we? Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. And then the next thing was, you might have seen most of the buildings were just like kind of like weird cubes. The design I had for it, I didn't get to implement this because I didn't get funded. Spoiler alert. There's these really cool geometry nodes that you can use in Blender that are also just part of this, where I can reduce the scope quite a lot of what I was doing. And again, with a public Blender asset, I don't have to reinvent the wheel there, and it's native to Blender. So it exports into all my other stuff as well, which was nice. So Here's how that actually looked. This is the opening scene in Blender. So I have just all of I can just do everything in Blender and I don't have to think about how it works in Godot, because it just imports and then it just works. But because I kind of like have all these objects in a way that I name them and they're kind of like in relation to each other in a way that I can just think about them as the city itself. I don't have like weirdly technical names for them or anything. It was very easy to then kind of like treat it as like kind of like theater again. I get the code like, oh, you just fix the, oh, well that's, yeah, all right, there we go. It's gonna make it very hard for y'all to read. So I can kind of like post import, this is a piece of code in Godot, but basically what it just says is, once I have loaded the thing in, then the theater people come in and they start preparing the scene. What do? They fix some texture issue that I had, make it feel pixelated. They add hitboxes so I can actually drive into things, and they mounted some lights. So again, I kind of used the idea of using accessible language, that if you read this code, you can kind of just, instead of it being very technical, you can kind of see like, oh, this is just a few steps we take in order to spruce up the scene a bit. Feel free to raise your hand whenever you see the blue thing if you have questions. So this is an example of how the mounting of lights work. I just go into the scene and I just look for all of the street lights. This is actual code. This is actually how it's in there. And then I just create a light thing in Godot and then kind of just screwing the light bulb in is literally what I'm doing. So in that way, I don't have to mess with I could use the lighting system in Blender, but I wanted a specific pixelated effect that I could only get by setting it up in Godot. This is also not flawless code, by the way. This is probably in some like fever dream fueled rage that I typed this down. But in this way, I didn't have to like go back and forth a lot. The non-destructive part of this is nice because as long as I have the street lights in the scene, this code will work, and I'll just have the pretty little lights that you saw, which is, they'll sway around a bit and do pretty things. This is the trailer. Now, moving on to really nice part, Craft. It's a fantasy merchant simulator I'm working on right now. This is some really cool title art that was made very recently. I really like it a lot. And I made, is it not? Oh, God. No. I'm putting shame to your work, sorry. Yeah, so, for this project, I basically did 2 tech arty things. Obviously, I've done a lot more on the project, but most of that has just been very game devy in the sense of like actually implementing systems and very codey. I don't want to really get into that. I'm going to quickly talk about the PSD importer again. Yeah, we're in Blur Town. Oh God. Oh jeez. All right. Whew. The problem statement for me personally was I worked on a lot of projects before this project where I just noticed like, oh, there's always this kerfuffle with, getting assets in. And, I know that I heard from some people that use Unity that there's definitely a Unity PSD importer. And, I just thought when I was working on other projects, I want to do something where you can just drag a PSD in and the artist doesn't have to worry about anything. So the problem statement was kind of like, oh, it takes a lot of time and we might want to do some pre-processing on the assets, but having them all in a PSD is nice because then, you can just go into the PSD instead of having to look for certain files or tell the artist put it in this order or, name it in this way. As long as it's in the file and has like some reliable layer structure, I can just do everything from that point on. Another thing is that our artist works on iPad, so I couldn't make a solution that specifically worked on their computer, but it shouldn't require a lot of installs to do for us either, so that if they wanted to use it on their computer, that they didn't have to set up a lot of heavy programs or use Adobe or something. I didn't reinvent the wheel. There was some guy that already made some code for working with PSDs, so I just reused that, and I decided to use Rust so that some other people on my team, Logan, one of the people here, could also use it on his machine because he used Windows and I use Mac OS. So and that way we were both happy and we don't have to scream at each other. So this is what I presented last time. Basically, the way that it works is you have just the layers in Photoshop, and then it just exports that one-to-one in a directory structure for Godot, and then I can just recompose that in Godot in any way that I want. But the thing that I didn't mention last time is the tech artisty part. Tech artisty part. Yeah. I made a system in between, and this is very code heavy because the target audience for this artist is other tech artists. So if you also have this problem in your Godot project and you just wanted to also use a PSD importer, but you don't like how it exports or you don't want certain layers to be in, I put a little import script in between that kind of allows you to just say, oh, I don't, in this case, for instance, if the name starts with an A, I don't want that layer in, which is a very arbitrary way to filter your layers in a PSD, but it's just for the sake of an example. And otherwise, it just exports it normally. So this gives you the power to basically say, oh, for this character, we have a bunch of like sketch layers on top, and I just want to ignore the sketch layers. I only want to export the layers that are part of this group, or I want to maybe combine some of these layers and put them in one image so that the artist doesn't have to flatten all the layers before exporting. You can just automate that. So the artist doesn't have to have a destructive workflow anymore because they can just alter a layer, put it in Godot, and it just exports the way that you want it to. The only thing that the tech artist would need to do is just write a simple script, maybe per character or per scene, and have it just somewhat reliably work from that point on. Some things that you could do with this also is, like I said, remove the sketch layers from a PSD before exporting. You can take some of the textures out and use them for shaders in between, for instance, or just pre-process the shader or the texture. So, you know, in our game we have a lot of clothing, and this could be an opportunity for us to make sure that our artist doesn't have to make 50 different kinds of clothing with different colors, but we can kind of like do all that work for them. Last one for the online section. This is something I recently had the honor of working on. We wanted to use a new narrative backend, is I think the best term for it. Artisty is kind of like a dialogue system that wasn't available for Godot, but has had a lot of success in other games, such as Death and Taxes by Placeholder Gameworks. And we had a lot of people in-house that already had knowledge of this tool, so this kind of like, you know, you have to follow creative intent. This is the preferred tool, and this is what we know. So there's no use in using other systems just because they work better with Godot, you know? If we have to, you know, completely obliterate the don't reinvent the wheel rule, we have to because, you know, the artists prefer it, and that's what it's all about. If they can't write the story in a tool that they're comfortable with, then we're not going to have as good of a story. So that's the choice that I made on that. It's not 100% finished yet, so I don't have a lot to show for it. But yeah, that's all of it for the online folks. So, you know, if I had the music, I would play it right now. So if you watched online and I just gave you mental burnout from the amount of information I streamed to your brain, my apologies, but thank you so much for tuning in. I'll give the online people, if there are any, an opportunity to ask some questions in the chat. I'll wait for maybe a few minutes. And meanwhile, for the sake of everybody here, take a break, get some water. I'll set up part 2, and we can quickly get into some other stuff. Until that point, if anybody has questions, just ask them.
Will part 2 be more examples?
More examples after this?
Yes.
Yes.
So we won't be going through anything new, just 3 existing concepts.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Oh, okay.
I have a question.
I don't see any.
Did the stream also see the wrong stuff, or is it just on RT? Oh, the stream also?
Yeah. Yeah, because it
So
just.
they are seeing the screen.
Okay. So weird.
I don't
Fighting
know.
it.
Now you are writing a PowerPoint importer.
Yeah, for next time, so I don't make a fool of
What
myself.
software are you using? That
For this?
Yeah.
Just Google Slides, so like a browser.
That's so weird.
Yeah, I think it's like a frame buffer thing that it just only takes.
Custom presentation tool that actually works.
Yeah. All right. I don't see any questions coming in from online, so goodbye everybody online, and come to Spelkollektivet. Check the shit around here. Thank you.